Well, we're on the last leg now. This is part 4 of the art of the Aegean in Greece. So I hope you're enjoying it. Let's move right ahead. So I left you looking at Alexander the Great, and this is a piece I usually don't even stop and talk about, although I think it was thought that this was created by a woman artist. Well, and we're going to stop and talk about this theater. So you can look at this scene now and see how the Greeks were sort of the birth of drama, of theater. So drama had been part of religious festivals. Theaters were given elaborate entrances, not shown here, and the stage buildings held elaborate functional architectural facades, also not seen here. It's in ruins. This is the theater of Epidaurus, and I just want to point out that this is where the stage building would be. I'll show you a reconstruction in a second, but the theater was carved into a natural hillside and sort of perfected. So the curve of the hill, the slant of the hill was used by the builders, and then they just sort of stacked up a bunch of stones to make this perfect half circle known as a theater. And but this illustrates what it would have looked like with its building down here, which makes a lot more sense. So not only was there a space, a platform to perform, but the stone facade of the building would have captured all of the sound, the acoustics, and pushed it back towards the audience. So there was a function to it as well. You can see multiple levels, multiple doors, entrances, ramps. So all of these were utilized in the production of these plays. They had both comedies and tragedies. They were really fond of their tragedies. So, but anyway, this is theater. And tiers of marble seats replace the bare hillsides. Colonnades and facades are bound by classical orders, but increasing use is made of Corinthian in the later structures. So now we move to Hellenistic art. The period of Hellenistic art began after the death of Alexander the Great in 323 BC. So one reason why I showed you that map of his territory was that it represents the spread of Greek ideas, Greek culture, Greek art styles over the known world. So it sort of Hellenizes other countries as well. Artist's subject matter shifted from the heroic to the everyday and was wrought with emotional melodrama. Sculptors diverged into anti-classical and the emulation of earlier classical models. And I'll show you what I mean by both of those. So art does change dramatically in the Hellenistic period. I should also say after the death of Alexander, his whole empire was divided into 3 sections, and each section given to one of his 3 generals. So I've already shown you how Ptolemy took over Egypt. I showed you something from Ptolemaic period. Anyway, so this is now from the impulse to revive the classical style. This is the Aphrodite of Melos. Oh, should have been capitalized down there. Also called the Venus de Milo in the modern world. So artists' subject matter shifted from the heroic to the everyday, as I just told you, and sculptors diverged into anti-classical and the emulation of earlier classic models. So that's what's going on with her. So look at her face. It's pretty much expressionless. The only thing that is anti-classical is her nudity. It's not clear what she is doing. She could be about to step into a bath. But because we're missing her arms, we don't get that. Her body is twisted, so it's got a little more movement going on. This is, or was, for many years, the most famous sculpture, female sculpture in the world. And here's where sculptors diverged into the anti-classical. So this is a sculpture of what's called the market woman. I think she looks like a very old woman, and she's walking, so she's stepping out, and she's carrying baskets because she's been doing her marketing. But if you look closely at her face, she does not look ideal. She does not look beautiful. She does not even look young. And this shows this Hellenistic trend toward the melodramatic. Why would somebody make this old woman? Where would they place a sculpture like this? She was just a little over 4 feet tall, so she's not life size. I don't know the answer to that, but if you're interested, you should take Art History 1 and find out what was going on there. But anyway, I just point this out as one of the things that happens in the Hellenistic period. This is another piece from the Hellenistic period. This is the Nike of Samothrace, dating from about 190 BCE. And this is victory again. Anytime you see Nike, or I suppose you want to call it Nike, it represents victory. So this is a winged female figure, the personification of victory. The pose is of the figure just landing on the prow of a ship. The drapery on the torso and the legs are extremely naturalistic. It reminds me a lot of the Athena Nike that we saw on the Acropolis, but it's got wings. It's a lot more active, a lot more action. And just the attempt of the artist to try to show the force of the wind blowing her drapery and her wings back is amazing. Wish we could see what happened to her arms and her head, but there you go. Here's another Hellenistic piece, which I find particularly interesting because it deals with a group of people that I have spent a lot of time working on, and that is Celts. So this is the dying Gallic Trumpeter. It's a Roman copy of a Greek piece. A lot of the pieces that we've looked at are Roman copies, and yeah, you just have to accept them as being Greek. So this shows the Greek fascination with a group that is not Greek, that are barbarians, meaning that they did not speak Greek or Latin. They were completely other. They were exotic. They were different. And they were kind of a fascination. It's almost like Bigfoot. Like if Bigfoot were captured or somebody actually saw him and photographed him for real, people would be fascinated. They'd want to see what this non-human looked like. And that's kind of what's going on here with this Gallic trumpeter. So there were these Galatians in the areas near Greece, bordering on the Greek territories, and they would fight the Greeks periodically, and the Greeks, so they were observed by Greeks. They were a non-historic culture, so what we know about them is from the witness of Greeks and Romans later. So this artist documented this. They found it very interesting that the warriors would go into battle without any armor or body covering. They would go in nude. Other things here, their details are reflecting real history, like their hair. They would put stuff in their hair. I've heard it was clay. I've heard it was other stuff, pitch maybe, in their hair to make it stand up and look scary, like a lion. And they would want, their whole idea was that by screaming and going into battle in this way, that they would freak out the opponents and have an advantage over them. There's also the style of wearing a mustache. So, and I don't think you've seen any, except on the Riace warrior, but most Greeks were shaved. They would wear a neck ring called a torque. I'll show you one in a second. And this guy is a trumpeter. Here's his trumpet. So he's been wounded in the side, and that's shown here. There's a gash with drips of marble blood coming out of his side. This is a torque that is a real torque that was found, represents the sort of neck ring that the Gallic warrior wore. Just solid gold. Another piece of Hellenistic art is this incredible altar of Pergamon in Turkey. This was an altar to Zeus, and there's a lot of unusual things about this, so I want you to get a good look at it. The altar of Zeus at Pergamon, dating from 175. The Germans found it, deconstructed it, hauled it off to Berlin, and reconstructed it there. So it's in a museum in Berlin now. The Pergamene kingdom was wealthy. The rulers spent a lot of money building their Acropolis. The West Front here is in a museum in Berlin. The frieze is 400 feet long. The figures are larger than life. It's a gigantomachy, meaning it's a battle with giants. So that's the subject of the frieze. It'd be nice if I had a human for scale standing next to this. I'll have to work on that next time. The classical form of the temple has been completely reimagined as a U-shaped structure. So imagine somebody having something like a little model set for making a temple like the Parthenon, and then taking it apart and reconstructing it in a U shape, and that's kind of what you get here. The difference, there's a lot of differences besides that though, and one is that this frieze of sculpted figures is not up above, it's not high, it's down below, and it's in our space. So look, for example, over here, next to the stairs, right there, and you can see figures popping out of the ground, popping out of the wall, and even resting a knee on the very stairs that the humans walk up. So this brings them into our space. It makes them more relatable, and not necessarily in a good way, but in a more intense way than something stuck up in a pediment. And another detail from this, showing the amazing high relief. It's such a high relief that you could stick your hand completely behind that arm of Athena there. So Athena attacking the giants, the altar of Zeus at Pergamon. And this is almost our last figure. We're getting to the very end now. This is called Liakawan and his sons, and it is a group of 3 figures. There's a story coming, so bear with me here. This is also considered perhaps the most significant Hellenistic piece ever. It was made in the 2nd to 1st century BCE. The group was considered the height of Greek art when it was found in Rome during the Renaissance period, so there was a lot of hubbub when it was discovered in Rome. And it illustrates the very dramatic climax of a story from the Iliad. So first of all, as I tell you the story, I want you to focus in on the anatomy and all the details. So I'll get rid of all the text so you can just focus. There we go. So this story of these figures comes from the story of the Trojan War, which was so popular forever in Greece. It was like a bestseller, perennial favorite. It's the themes of many artworks. So in this story, the city of Troy is being besieged by the Greek army. They're over there with their army outside, and inside you have the Trojans. The gods of Greece are actors in this story, and the Greek army is supported by Athena, who is with them, who encourages them, who helps them, who cheats for them, and the Trojan army is supported by Poseidon. The Trojans, not the army, it's the whole town, it's the city of Troy. So the Greeks, as you probably know, created a giant wooden horse and loaded it with soldiers and pushed it up to the gates of the city of Troy. And then all the Trojans are aware of this. They look out, they see the giant horse. They go, oh my gosh, what is this? Is this good? Is this bad? Why is this horse here? Should we let it in? Should we not let it in? Poseidon tries to help the Trojans. He tries to protect them from the Greek army that's in the horse. So he goes to his priest, the guy he's going to communicate with, and that's this guy, and his name is Liakawan. He was the priest of Poseidon in the city of Troy. And he tells him to warn the king, King Priam of Troy, do not let that giant horse into the city. It will be bad news for the Trojans. So Laocoon is going to go tell the king. And he's on his way, and Athena figures out what Poseidon has done, so she sends a serpent, a snake, or a monster to stop him from giving the warning. And that's what happens here. This is a supernatural snake that has been sent by Athena to stop Laocoon. And you can see he's doing a pretty good job. He's completely entangled Laocoon in the center and his two sons, and he's about to inflict a fatal bite onto his thigh. I have no idea what kind of snake this is. Doesn't matter. It's supernatural. This is incredible for the anatomy of the figures, especially Laocoon. Look at how every muscle in his body is straining to get rid of this snake. And his face reflects real agony. So that whole idea of the perfection of the calm, beautiful face is way behind us. It's not a factor here. We have Laocoon struggling and in agony. That's why this is such an important piece and so Hellenistic, so Hellenistic. And perhaps my favorite Hellenistic piece is this one, The Boxer at Rest, and it's a bronze piece. This is a bonus feature. It's not in the book or on the PDF of the slideshow, but it shows an athlete. And in the classical period, we saw athletes reflected as, or depicted as, perfect and ideal human beings, in their nudity, standing, looking victorious and unworried about anything, perfect faces. This is an athlete who's old. It looks like he's had many fights. He's a boxer, and he's tired and he's defeated. But the Hellenes, the Hellenistic Greeks at this point, are admiring this. They admire this look of experience, of pain, of suffering, and still he's noble. Still he is a thing of beauty. Their idea of beauty has changed to being more real. So I said here, the work comes from a period in Greek art where there is a movement away from the idealized heroic depictions of the body and youth, and an exploration of emotional themes and greater realism. So you've got to love The Boxer at Rest. And that comes the end of Greece.